Hello, welcome back to Mining Network. We're back from PDAC at our desks, and I'm with Glenn Jessam, the CEO of Silver Tiger Metals. Glenn, good to be with you.
Thanks for having me on again, Peter. It's great to see you. We're both a little road weary, I think.
Yeah, exactly. Well, we were trying to organise an interview during BMO, and then things got a bit too busy, and then same with PDAC last week. So glad to have you back on. First of all, how's the travels been going and the marketing? And also, you've obviously had some drill results out during that period. So let's have a quick chat about that as well.
Absolutely. It's been a whirlwind. I mean, we were into Vancouver was MIF, and then VRIC, and then Catch Your Breath, and of course the next big one is the BMO big conference in Miami. So I did that, and then back. I think I was home to sleep in my bed a day or maybe two, a night or two, and then of course right into PDAC and just back from that and heading this week over to Europe to do some marketing on both shoulders of the SMI conference in Zurich. So a very busy time, but a great time to be talking about, and we'll talk about that in a bit, Mexico and Mexican mining projects. But drill results a little not dated because I know we did try to coordinate maybe a call when they came out around BMO. But look, I think it's for your viewership and your listeners and your followers, kind of as they know, door number one, the pit is now ready to build, and we're just waiting for our permit. We'll talk a little bit about that at the end. But the second part is the underground portion of the deposit. We're coming with a PEA on that underground, the first economic look at that in May or June of this year. That's only a couple of months from now. So it's back to work on that, and back to work means back to drilling. So, as you know, we're now underground. We've talked about that many times on the show. So now that we are underground, let's use that beautiful portal we've built as a tool to explore. And so the first drill rig was established there in late December, early January. The first holes are targeting that big sulfide zone, which is that wide bulk tonnage sitting, epigenetic to those high-grade silver veins that's sitting on the Precambrian granite, the basement rock. And the first three drill holes, I just wanted to get something out there to show people we're back to work. They were all very reasonable, but the kind of hole we're looking for in the sulfide zone is that highlight one, or that one that's in the title of the press release. From memory, it's a while ago. I think it was over 3 meters of 1.5 kilos silver, very respectable. But what we love to see is that bulk tonnage component, which is outside of those high grade silver veins, starting to show in that sulfide vein. And this confirms more of it. I think it was 17 or 18 meters of over 300 grams. So a wonderful start. More to come. We're going to stay one drill rig for now, and we'll expand that as we go. But with a lot of preparation coming for getting the open pit ready when it's permitted and finishing the PEA, that's enough exploration for now. That will ramp up as the year continues to more than one drill rig. So very good start. We were very pleased to be back drilling and exploring the high grade at El Tigre.
Yeah, good. Obviously, it's one of those things where really the big catalyst at the moment is the open pit. Obviously, you can be working on the underground, and these are exceptional results. But I
Mhm.
guess everyone looking at this is really now thinking, okay, when can we start building this thing and getting some cash
Peter,
flow down the line, right?
Peter, what people forget about this is that we're going to be drilling El Tigre for the next 10, 20, or 30 years. So there is no rush. We've drilled off, 100 million silver equivalent ounces in the open pit, to 113 million in the underground already. Our independence in the PFS gave us another 100 if we just tighten up the drilling. And that's in 3 or 4 kilometers of 25 kilometers of
Yeah.
trend. So yes, there's lots of time to drill, but the way I get 1, 2, 3, 4, 7, 8, 9, 10 drill rigs operating here is we get that pit in production and we generate that amazing cash flow that we've talked about in that PFS on a yearly basis to explore and just continue to add ounces on both at surface and other open pits and underground along the trend.
Okay, good. Well, I was reading on Mexico Business News. I'll put a link actually in the description of the article, but it sounded as though the Ministry of Mining in Mexico were in attendance of PDAC. I must have missed it while we were filming, but from the article, it sounded pretty positive in terms of the minister essentially saying that they're looking to dish out some permits relatively soon, and pretty positive, I guess, notes on open pit from their side. Was you in attendance? How did it go?
It was, I did actually see the article and I perused it, so I'm glad that, it is getting some general distribution. But I was fortunate enough to be there on that Tuesday morning at PDAC when Fernando Aboites, and he's the head of Extractive Activities Coordination Unit within the Ministry of Economy for Mexico. So really a simpler term for that would be in charge of mining within the Ministry of Economy. So he gave a keynote speech, I would guess, and from what I could see from the article, it was a journalist who was there and basically either from the article or interviewing him after, because there were some quotes in it, I think. Um, really put that forward. It was a very positive speech at PDAC from this representative from the Mexican government. We were very buoyed by it. We've been saying for a long time we'd seen things getting much better with respect to mining, and we expected it to be better. But to have a keynote speech made at such a prestigious event in Canada by the person who's in charge within the ministry was we thought very positive. I'm not going to get into what was said in the article. I mean, you have a copy of the article. I'm sure you could send it to your viewers if you wanted to, and they could read it themselves. But what really came off for me was, the government of Mexico, who we have worked with for decades and have nothing but the highest respect for the country we've worked in for so long, showing a renewed commitment to mining. I thought that was the overriding message that I took away from it personally. I really like the focus on transparency, community engagement, environmental responsibility that was part of that speech. We have been operating that way for decades in Mexico. So, to see that being so important, it just basically fits within our core values as we've always had, and in particular at Silver Tiger, which we're talking about now. There was a clarification on open pit mining, which we thought was very positive. There was a quote in there. I remember it fairly well, I think. And I think just let me say, I've got it written here somewhere. I just want to make sure I get what the words were. Yeah, this was from a quote from Mr. Boites. Any proposals to regulate or prohibit this method, which was referring to open pit mining, will not move forward at this stage. So, that really offered certainty to us as open pit miners. It's something I've been, logically saying for a long time. We've seen all kinds of signals for that, but to see that in a speech in Canada, we thought was, great. It gave great certainty, not only to the miners, but to the market. And, I think the last thing I took from the speech was that, there was just going to be, an accelerating of new projects being permitted. So, those are my highlights, but I don't want to read, I'm not putting words in anyone's mouth. That's boy, that's more than a week ago. So that's just from my memory. But I think that I do recall seeing that article, and I thought that was a good synopsis. So maybe if you
Well,
have that, then
yeah,
you could
let me just read
start
out
with.
let me just read out what I think was the most important part here, and
Okay, sure. You have it there. Very good.
Scheinbaum's administration is committed to accelerating new mining projects. He adds that approvals for several key projects are expected in the coming months,
Mhm.
signaling a shift towards more proactive approach to the industry. Permits in a couple of months, Glenn. Is that happening?
Well, that you're reading that right from the from the article on the speech that was done that Tuesday. So look, it's of course very, very, very positive, and this is. I've been saying that as a very self-interested mining CEO of Silver Tiger, which is ready to build a project for a long time, that we expect permits to come and come quite soon. So to hear that is very, very positive. I agree.
But in terms of the way, how much engagement are you seeing in the last couple of months versus the last year, for example, when it was under like, are you noticing a massive shift in sentiment within Mexico at the moment?
Oh, yeah, we find this, all governments of Mexico have been, for a pleasure for us to deal with. But with respect to mining and communication look at this speech given as one example, giving clear direction on where things are going. We find it very, very positive. I mean, you can go back and look at interviews I've done over the last 7 or 8 months since the new administration. I've been nothing but commendable and laudatory in my comments with respect to the government. I think they're doing an absolutely fantastic job on all fronts, and including mining.
Good. Okay. And how does that look? Say, for example, in a couple of months, the permit does arrive. Are you ready? Is the debt lined up? Is
So yeah,
investment?
so we are ready, and I think that's a very strong message that I need to give. So we're looking at door number two, and we don't sit on our hands where we're drilling and we're coming with a PEA for the underground. But make no mistake, my priority is to build this open pit as quickly as possible, so that we can basically get the excuse me, the as I would say, economic benefit from that, which is going to benefit not only the project, but also all of the surrounding, communities that we find ourselves in Sonora. To do that, we need to focus. The first thing we need to do is, what would the first 3 months after we are issued a permit look like? Well, there'll be a whole list of things to do, and I'm not going to bore you with it. It would take an hour. But we have Francisco Albalez, who is our COO, who is one of the most experienced mine builders in all of Mexico. And I asked him while we were at PDAC, say, walk me through the first 3 months. After about 20 minutes of him listing off everything we had to do, I said, okay, I get it. You're ready. So he's ready. But one thing being ready is that we need the money. So our capex is 86 million USD to build this. That's with a 15% contingency built in. Very pleased that I have 3 term sheets for debt packages from 3 different lenders that will all provide an amount in excess of the minimal capex so that we can build the project. So we're going through a process on that right now. I'll continue to do that. I would expect that list to perhaps get longer. I guess I should say 4 term sheets, but 3 main ones I'm focusing on. If I get no more, I'm quite happy with where I sit right now. So we're going to be ready, because what you'd like to do is you'd like to get to the point where you could say, look, we have a permit. Everybody has known the plan for a long time. We have the team to execute that plan, and now we have the money to build it, to execute the plan. So that's really what we're working at here over the next little while as we await our permit.
You were talking about there's been offers of the minimum amount that you need. Are you anticipating 100% debt on the project in terms of
I
financing?
don't want to get into, I think I've got to be careful in what I do. I don't think anyone would be 100% debt. But the term sheets I'm talking about are uh, debt packages, let's call it that, which are in excess of the capex of 86 million. So I'm just going to leave it at that. There's always going to be debt. There's going to be equity required at the time, or how are you going to slice it and dice it? And part of what I'm going through right now in dealing with all of these is which is the best for the company, and then package, and then of course what that means, which is the best for the shareholders. We factor that in, of which I think I'm the second or third largest. So we make sure we choose the right package and get it to the best position we can for the value creation for the company.
Okay, and then just remind us as well, say for example, in a couple of months' time, if this article is correct, and if you are one of these companies that will be getting a permit, what's the timeline after that? And just remind us of the cash flow and the payback. How
Yeah,
long until the
so
company's
really,
actually ready?
if you're looking at the first phase of this mine, then we see the PFS. I'll just use the time frames that are in the PFS document. It's an 18-month build. That's what's in the document. I'm going to just refer to spot prices today, not study prices, so that we can, we'll compare apples to apples. At spot prices today, your payback would be about 1.4 years, which is phenomenally short payback. Your your IRR is in the range of 57 to 58%, give or take a little bit because the price moves daily, but that's just a good estimate. What I really, really love about the 86 million capex with the 15% contingency, but what I really love about the project and why it's so special is it just is so profitable for that kind of to drive those numbers, and get that type of return that we're looking at on an 86 million capex. It just generates free cash flow. It's a 9-year mine life, and it generates over at spot prices $500 million after tax free cash flow, US. And all these numbers, of course, I'm talking about are US. So really that will give you such optionality for a number of things. Think if we get that in production, and we get the PEA and then a PFS done on the underground while we're building that, it just allows you the option of self-funding the underground. That's one big option. So, really an exciting option. Secondly, imagine the exploration. We're talking about one drill rig underground. Does that turn to 2 or 3 or 4? And then you start stepping outside of that 3 or 4 kilometers where we've done all the work in north and south, where we have, 10 kilometers on each side of what looks very, very prospective from the limited mapping, sampling, and drilling we've done there.
Okay, and then just remind us, what's your ounce output per annum, and what do you think it could get up to if the underground got incorporated?
We're back of envelope. I think, I can speak on the PFS. It's going to make, it's 4.8 million silver equivalent ounce, so call it 5 million. With the underground, and this is a guesstimate. In May or June, when you look at that PEA, you can see the amounts, but we're going to be, let's say, somewhere around 4 million, maybe 5 million, but call it 4 million. So you're a 9-10 million ounce producer. And timing wise, if everything worked perfectly and we get our permits soon in the next several months, we would have by the end of 26 the first part of the mine built, and cash flowing. And so by end of 26, you would, you're going to start construction of the mill. We already own the mill; it's already on site, as you know, and get that bolted together. And you need to do some more underground development. We may do some of that if cash allows as we build the open pit, so we get out in front of it, get some faces open. That's only look at this is a guesstimate, okay? We wait for the study, but call that 12 months. That's not a long process to get the underground producing. And now we're end of 2027 and you're a 9-10 million ounce producer. We know the valuations for 9-10 million ounce silver producers in Mexico. There's lots of them all around me. Some Silvercrest just sold. I mean, you look at Gatos, go look at Orla and look at their production profile. And, we know who our peers are, and we know who we're trying to emulate. And those are alpha returns from our valuation right now if we execute.
Yeah, just from my telling you to do people's research for them, but what is the market cap of some of the guys around you that are
Well,
producing?
if you look at Silvercrest, they just sold to Core. That's pretty. I think that's done or almost done. And maybe they're having their vote. That was about 10 million ounces, high grade, profitable production. I'm not saying we're exactly the same, but it's we're looking at peers,
Ballpark,
and
yep.
a short mine life at this point. I think of 5 or 6 years, and that was sold to Core for $2 billion. If you look at the at the Gatos transaction, where I think half of that company was bought by First Majestic. I think they ended up giving up 40% of First Majestic. Was it 700 or 800 million or whatever the half was? A very large number, approaching $1 billion. And Orla, a bigger production, a little different, but those are multi-billion-dollar market cap companies. So our peer group is great. We just need to get there. We're not there yet. I'm not trying to say that's who we are, but from the first time we drilled the first drill hole in 17, 18, 9 drill holes, 19 in El Tigre, this is the path we set ourselves on. And so far, we've delivered everything we've said we would. Now the final step is to, get into production. That's not easy. There's a lot of hurdles ahead. No one's going to sit here and say piece of cake, but our team, led by Francisco Albalez, have done it numerous times, and so that experience will help as we execute our plan.
Good. Okay, Glenn. Anything else that we should be looking out for in the next couple of months, other than that holy grail?
It's. I think we've summarized it well. We're out since, as I said, just going all around the world to get the investors basically ready for what we've always said. We're going to build the next great silver mine in Mexico. We're getting really close to that. So it's no good if you do that if you don't tell the world. So right now is a heavy marketing, and we're going to continue to do that. And it's going to be a very exciting and I think a reformative year. For El Tigre, I think you're going to see the potential here with all of these things we have in front of us for a massive re-rating in value, and that's exciting. And none of that really is dependent on much more that we have to do other than execute, and we intend to execute.
Good, Glenn. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Peter.